Victor Langston pressed himself flat against the hallway wall, barely breathing. The study door was open just enough for the voices to slip through and reach him like cold fingers wrapping around his throat. He had only come downstairs for a glass of water. His legs were weak these days. Everything was weak these days, but something made him stop. Some instinct, old and sharp, honed after 40 years of reading boardrooms full of liars. 3 more days, Sabrina said. Her voice was smooth, relaxed, like she was talking about the weather. That's all it'll take. Victor heard the soft clink of a wine glass. Then Ethan laughed. His own son, the boy he had coached through Little League, the boy he had watched graduate, the boy he had built everything for. When Dad's gone, Ethan said, everything becomes ours. Victor's hand found the wall. He needed it to stay standing. He stood there for a long moment, listening to the silence that followed, the comfortable silence of 2 people who had already made their decision and were simply waiting for the calendar to catch up. Then he heard footsteps moving toward the door, and he pushed himself down the hallway, back into the shadows, his heart slamming against his ribs like a trapped animal. He made it to his bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed, stared at the floor. 3 days. They were counting. He pressed his palms to his knees and forced himself to breathe slowly. His mind reached back, sorting through months of evenings where he had sat in his favorite armchair and felt the world tilt sideways without warning. The dizziness that came from nowhere, the nausea that left him hollow. The mornings he woke up confused, reaching for his wife's hand before remembering she had been gone for 11 years. His doctor, Nolan Pierce, had told him it was aging. Victor, you're 68 years old. Your body is sending you a message. Slow down. He had said it with that practiced sympathy that made the words feel gentle even when they landed hard. Ethan had sat beside Victor during that appointment, nodding, concerned, squeezing his father's shoulder. Victor had looked at his son and felt grateful. Now he sat alone in the dark and felt like a fool. He was worth $45 million. He had built it from nothing, a working-class kid from Georgia who had outworked and outlasted every person who had ever doubted him. He had survived market crashes, hostile takeovers, the death of his wife, the loneliness of an empty house. He had believed, in the deepest part of himself, that blood meant loyalty, that Ethan, no matter what, was his. He was wrong. The next morning, Victor came downstairs and found Ethan at the kitchen table, scrolling through his phone, dressed in one of his expensive shirts. Sabrina stood at the counter, already preparing the evening tea, something she had started doing months ago, insisting it helped Victor sleep. "Dad," Ethan said, looking up with that warm smile. "How'd you sleep?" "Fine," Victor said. He watched Sabrina's back, watched the way her hands moved near the counter, unhurried, confident. "You look tired," Ethan said. "You should rest more." "Maybe," Victor said. He poured himself coffee and sat down slowly. "What are your plans today?" "Nothing much. Just working from home. Sabrina and I were thinking of taking you to dinner later. Somewhere nice." Victor looked at his son's face. Really looked. The easy eyes, the relaxed jaw, the careful performance of a man who felt completely safe. "That sounds nice," Victor said. He drank his coffee, said nothing else. Later that morning, Maria Santos found him sitting on the back porch, staring out at the Atlantic. She had worked in that house for 15 years. She had cleaned up after storms and parties and grief. She had seen Victor at his strongest and at his most broken. She set a glass of water on the table beside him and started to walk away. "Maria," he said quietly. She stopped. "Sit down." She sat. For a long moment neither of them spoke. A pelican coasted low over the water, then disappeared. The wind moved through the palmetto trees along the fence line. "How long have you noticed?" Victor asked. She looked at him for a long time. He could see the struggle in her face, the years of trained discretion fighting against something she had clearly been carrying for a while. "The tea," she said finally. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Victor nodded. "I saw her," Maria said. "About 3 weeks ago. I was coming through the side hallway and the kitchen door was almost closed. She didn't see me, She had something in her hand, a small packet, and she was stirring it into your cup. She paused. I told myself I was wrong. I told myself I was imagining it. I didn't want to believe. You're not imagining it, Victor said. Maria pressed her hand over her mouth. I should have come to you sooner. I'm sorry, Mr. Langston. I was afraid. I thought if I said something and I was wrong, I would lose my job. I would lose everything. Caleb is still in school and I can't. Maria. Victor's voice was firm but kind. You came to me now. That's what matters. She wiped her eyes quickly. What are you going to do? Victor looked back out at the water. I'm going to find out exactly what's been done to me, he said. And then I'm going to make sure it never happens again. That afternoon, while Ethan took a call in his room and Sabrina drove to the salon, Victor moved through the house with a quiet urgency he hadn't felt in months. He went to the basement storage room, found the old panel behind the water heater, the security system he had installed 8 years ago, back when he was still running his firm and had reason to be careful. He had forgotten about it. Or perhaps some part of him had simply stopped believing he needed it. He pulled up the archived footage on his laptop. What he saw stopped the air in his lungs. There was Ethan, 2 months ago, moving through the study at 2 in the morning, pulling files from the cabinet, photographing documents with his phone. His face was calm and focused. Not the face of a curious son. The face of a man executing a plan. There was Sabrina, 3 weeks ago, leaning over the kitchen counter, her back angled deliberately toward the hallway camera, tipping a small white powder into his teacup, then stirring it slowly until it dissolved completely. She picked up the cup, examined it, set it down and smiled at nothing. Then there was a clip from the living room. Ethan was on the phone pacing. Pierce says the dementia documentation is solid, he said. If Dad tries to contest anything, it won't hold up in court. The man can't even remember what day it is. A pause, then a short laugh. At this rate, he'll never see Christmas. We need to move the timeline up. Victor closed the laptop. He sat in the silence of his basement for a very long time. Then he picked up his phone and called the one man he had trusted longer than anyone else on earth. Arthur Kane picked up on the second ring. Victor, it's been a while. Arthur, Victor said, I need you. And I need you to tell no one. 48 hours later, Victor sat across from Dr. Adrian Wells in a private medical office in Columbia, 60 miles from home. Wells was retired now, but he had been one of the top emergency physicians in the state. He owed Victor a favor that went back 20 years, and he asked no questions when Victor called. The results came back the following morning. Wells sat across the desk and folded his hands and looked at Victor the way doctors look at patients when they are choosing their words very carefully. Victor, the arsenic levels in your bloodstream are significant. This isn't environmental exposure. This is deliberate, sustained administration over a period of months. He paused. Another few weeks at this rate, and we would be having a very different conversation. Victor stared at him. How long? 4 to 6 months. Based on the accumulation. 4 to 6 months. Ethan and Sabrina had been in his home for 5 months. He drove back to Charleston in silence. He thought about the dinner table. The way Sabrina always brought his tea before bed with a gentle smile. The way Ethan always said, "You should rest more, Dad. Let us handle things." The careful, patient dismantling of a man who trusted them with everything. By the time he pulled into the driveway, something had shifted inside him. The grief was still there. The grief would probably never fully leave. But something older and harder had risen up beneath it. Something that had survived a lot. He walked inside. Ethan was in the kitchen eating a sandwich. "Dad, how was your drive?" "Good," Victor said. "Cleared my head. You should eat something." Sabrina made soup. "I'm not hungry," Victor said. "But thank you." He went upstairs. And he began to plan. Arthur moved quietly and quickly. Within days, Victor's real assets, the trusts, the accounts, the holdings that formed the true architecture of his fortune, were transferred into protected charitable foundations through a series of legal maneuvers that left no public trail. What remained visible in the standard records was a carefully constructed decoy. A monitored account that looked vulnerable and accessible. Bait on a hook. Agent Rebecca Hayes of the Federal Financial Crimes Division was brought in through Arthur's contacts. She reviewed everything Victor had, the footage, the recordings, the medical report, the financial irregularities, and she looked across the table at him with an expression that was equal parts fury and professionalism. Dr. Pierce has been filing false cognitive assessments in your medical record for 4 months, she said. We've already started looking at him. And the insurance policies Ethan opened 6 months ago, 2 of them name him as sole beneficiary upon your death. That's not greed. That's premeditation. How long do you need? Victor asked. Give us 3 weeks, she said. Don't change your behavior. Let them keep moving. 3 weeks. So Victor went home. He sat at the dinner table with the people who were poisoning him, and he talked about the weather and old memories and the sports scores. He let Sabrina bring his tea every evening, and he let Ethan help him to his chair, and he smiled tiredly and said he wasn't feeling well and watched their eyes flicker with something they tried very hard to hide. One evening Ethan sat beside him on the porch. The sun was going down. It was almost beautiful. Dad, Ethan said, I've been thinking. Maybe it's time we talked about the estate planning, just to make sure everything is in order. You know, in case. Victor looked at him. In case of what? Ethan smiled gently. In case something happens. You're not getting any younger, Dad. I just want to make sure you're protected. That's thoughtful, Victor said. Let me think about it. Ethan nodded, satisfied. He patted his father's hand. Victor let him. Inside, he felt something he hadn't expected. Not rage. Something colder and sadder. He looked at his son's profile in the fading light and tried to find the boy he had raised. The boy who used to fall asleep on his shoulder during long drives. The boy who cried at his mother's funeral and held Victor's hand through the whole service. That boy was still somewhere inside this man. But that man had chosen to let him die. 3 weeks later, Victor announced a retirement gala at the Harborview Grand. He told Ethan it was a chance to celebrate everything he had built. To say thank you to the people who had been part of his journey. He watched Ethan relay the news to Sabrina in the hallway that evening, their voices low and excited. This is it, Sabrina whispered. He's going to make the announcement, the inheritance, in public. Perfect, Ethan said, in front of witnesses. He can't take it back. The night of the gala, the ballroom was full. Business partners, old friends, community leaders, lawyers. Maria was there, standing quietly near the back. Caleb stood beside her, tall and steady. Ethan and Sabrina arrived looking polished and expectant. They worked the room. They shook hands and smiled and positioned themselves near the front when Victor finally took the stage. The room quieted. Victor stood at the podium and looked out at the faces. Some he had known for decades, some he was seeing for the last time. He let the silence sit for a moment. I want to thank you all for being here, he said. Tonight I have some things to share. Things I should have said sooner. He nodded to the technician at the side of the room. The large screen behind him lit up. The footage began to play. The room watched Ethan moving through the study at 2 in the morning. They watched Sabrina stirring powder into the teacup. They heard Ethan's voice on the phone. At this rate he'll never see Christmas. They saw the forged signatures, the unauthorized transfers, the insurance policies, the false medical records prepared by Dr. Nolan Pierce. The room was completely silent. Ethan's face had gone the color of chalk. Sabrina gripped his arm. Her jaw was tight. Her eyes were moving around the room the way eyes move when a person is calculating exits. I built everything in this room, Victor said, his voice steady, with the belief that the people closest to me were worth trusting. I was almost destroyed by that belief. He paused. Almost. He looked directly at his son. Ethan opened his mouth, closed it. Dad, he started. Don't, Victor said quietly. Agent Rebecca Hayes stepped forward from the edge of the room. Behind her, 3 federal agents moved through the ballroom doors. Ethan turned and saw them coming, and something in him seemed to collapse all at once. Not dramatically, not loudly, but quietly, like a building whose foundation had simply given out. Sabrina started talking fast, her voice high and sharp. "This is a misunderstanding. None of that footage. You can't just—" The agents were not listening. Ethan said nothing as the handcuffs went on. He looked once at his father across the crowded room. Victor held his gaze and did not look away. He wanted his son to see that he was still standing, that the man they had spent 5 months trying to erase was right there, on his feet, clear-eyed and alive. The room parted and the agents walked Ethan and Sabrina out. The doors closed behind them. In the months that followed, the full weight of what they had done came to light in court documents and federal filings. Dr. Pierce lost his medical license and faced criminal charges. The insurance fraud, the forgeries, the financial theft, it all unraveled completely, strand by strand, in testimony that Victor did not attend. He had said everything he needed to say in that ballroom. He sold the coastal estate. He didn't need it anymore. It held too many dinners he couldn't unknow, too many cups of tea, too many evenings watching the horizon and not understanding why he felt like he was disappearing. He bought a smaller house in Florida. Waterfront, quiet. He woke up each morning without dizziness, without nausea, without the slow, invisible weight of someone else's poison working through him. His body healed gradually, the way bodies do when the thing harming them is finally removed. Maria visited often. Her son Caleb, with a business loan Victor arranged through the foundations, opened a logistics company that was already turning a profit by the end of its first year. Victor attended the ribbon cutting. He stood in the parking lot of that small warehouse and felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Pride. Clean and uncomplicated. He redirected the bulk of his estate into scholarships and community programs. Opportunities for people who started where he had started, with nothing but hunger and will. He worked with Arthur to make it permanent, structured, untouchable. A fortune that would keep doing good long after he was gone. One evening he sat on his Florida balcony as the sun went down over the water. The light came across the surface in long copper lines. Somewhere out there a boat was moving slowly toward the horizon. He thought about Ethan. He expected the thought to hurt, and it did, but differently now. Not the sharp pain of fresh betrayal. Something older and more settled. A sorrow for a son who had looked at everything his father built and seen only what he could take from it. Who had looked at a living man and seen only an obstacle. Victor had given Ethan everything. Everything except the one thing no parent can manufacture in another person. Character. He leaned back in his chair and breathed in the salt air and let the light fade slowly around him. The people who tried to bury me, he said to no one, to the water, to the quiet evening, lost everything they came for. The people who stood beside me, they have everything that matters. He sat there until the last of the light was gone. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, he felt no fear. No fog. No slow dissolving at the edges. He felt entirely, completely himself. If the story moved you, if it made you think about the people in your life who show up when it counts, drop a comment below. And if you're not subscribed yet, now is the time. Hit that button, turn on notifications, and stay close, because the next story is already waiting for you.